Doug has been in this industry in the sense that day one, been SECs and Ellenhoff, Grossman and Schultz LLP right here in New York City, and he's one of actually our leader of the crowdfunding industry, is initiating from the day one SECs with all this thing, and we're very honored to have him today here. Without the introduction, Mr. Doug Ellenhoff.
Good morning, everybody. So how many of you actually understand on some level the rules of Reg A? Okay, so a pretty good number. We understand the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2? Okay, good. Then I can skip over most of that. I just want to go back to a couple things that Kim said, because I have slightly different figures, and it's partly because I got schooled by Scott Purcell at one of the most recent crowdfunding conferences that we had. I think there have been 14, is that a fair number, Scott, of closed Reg A financings raising in the aggregate about $170 million. I think the 800 she's talking about is what their expectations were, or what they had the ability under the qualified deals. There have been about 150-ish Reg A, both Tier 1 and 2 deals filed. And I think the number is slightly higher nowadays than the 50 that have been qualified. And in answer to the question, the reason the others haven't been qualified is there are a number of reasons. Mostly is they're relatively new filings. It takes a while to go through the common review process with the SEC, and they have to they run their course. It's not because they're not necessarily going to get qualified, although some of them might not get qualified. It's largely that Reg A requires a full disclosure statement to be filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. No different than an IPO. It's a full-blown document. Under Tier 2, the numbers need to be audited, not so under Tier 1. And so that process runs typically a 90 to 120-day course. We as a firm are involved with about 6 Reg A deals. One is qualified and currently has raised money. It's a very interesting deal called FIG. The other two of them are qualified and 3 more are in process. And I think it is fair to say that the range of issuers is pretty broad. No different than in the Title II space. You have real estate professionals who are using Reg A pretty successfully to raise what we call E-REIT capital, and they're not looking to trade their securities at all. Their Fundrise has done a couple, Realty Moguls in the process of doing one, and those are REITs. They're like non-traded REITs, and they're not going to trade on the OTC markets. On the other extreme, and how familiar are we with Elio Motors? Okay, that's why we're all here today. But that's a bit of a head fake. Elio Motors was a fairly unique offering. There are professionals in the room who you can speak to who are involved in that deal. Scott's Fund America was the broker-dealer of record. I think Kim said some of the Elio folks will be here. And that's the best positive reference point an industry could have to start out of the gate, and that was the first deal. They raised $17 million. They're doing what they're supposed to be. It was a concept deal, kind of pre-revenue. I'd say over 60% of the deals that have filed are pre-revenue. I think that also is part of the problem with the initial crop of Reg A filers. Just because you're pre-revenue doesn't mean that you have an interesting concept. Sometimes you're just not all that interesting to the crowd, whether or not it's the affinity crowd, which I think you were asking about, or you don't have a social media as following. But also I think, and this will be discussed much more later on, the whole way to market these deals is emerging. You have real experts in the room from CrowdFundX, who was the digital marketing firm for Elio and has worked on a lot of the Reg A Plus deals. It is and I'm using this in a non-legal sense, a fully marketed deal. When you do a real IPO, it's fully marketed through a broker-dealer. As the other gentleman was asking before, do you need to work with a broker-dealer? No. You can do it on your own. You don't have to do it through a funding platform. These were also called direct public offerings because the supposition from the Kickstarter days, when you heat map certain deals, is that you have enough of an audience that you're going to be able to sell your own securities. I think people are learning, since I'm a traditional securities lawyer, securities don't typically sell themselves. It's the adage in the industry. That's true for many companies, but there are those that stand alone like Elio, that it just captured people's attention. There was another one that didn't work out. I felt it was equally compelling, called XTI. It had other issues. It was a helicopter plane hybrid sort of thing. But those are the deals that are going to really get people's attention, and Americans want to crowdfund concept deals that maybe Wall Street or Silicon Valley are not prepared to do yet because they're too early in their life cycle, and that's a great opportunity. And so those will be done through Reg A+. I'm of a slightly different point of view than many. I think this is great utility for properly profiled companies, that their professionals work with them to really decide, are they spending the money, or are they going to get a good result, meaning raise money, or are they wasting money? I'm a little concerned about how the industry has evolved up till now. I've been involved with lots of emerging alternative marketplaces, and they all start off rocky in some ways, and then responsible people figure out the right way to maneuver forward. So I think professionals working with issuers really need to decide whether or not these issues are appropriate for Reg A+, because there's a lot of heavy lifting that goes into raising money. Particularly above $5 million. $5 million is a private placement. Maybe you can do it from friends and family and your angel network, but well beyond that, you're talking institutional money, which was the question. I don't think there's been a whole lot of institutional interest so far in this marketplace. I think it will evolve, particularly for the ones that are going to trade. There's another group, we won't talk about it too much today. Those are community banks. Those go tier 1. Because their securities preempt state law without the need to do tier 2. The secondary trading, I think, Andy, you're doing a panel later. So I don't have to go there, but obviously Elio Motors stands for the proposition it is possible, and it is traded successfully on the platform. The area for today that how many of you are potential issuers? Okay, a few. There are lots of resources in this room. Sydney always puts together tremendous conferences, and the people that are here, whether it's Kim, myself, there are other securities lawyers here, now you have exposure to unaccredited investors through Title III to raise up to $1 million. That may be a better path for pre-revenue companies that are not as interesting. Their basic industry plays, and so it's something you should talk to your advisors about, as well as Title II, which is obviously general solicitation, selling securities only to accredited investors. But the emphasis has to be look within and see if you're really appropriate, that you can raise money from people who who think well of your services, or you can work with the platforms that are here like Start Engine today. And then the digital agencies are front and center to this conversation. Even if you have an audience, you need to work with people who are going to extend your reach to get the word out effectively through social media and otherwise. And so, like I said, Crowdfund X is here today. You need to take them aside and really ask some tough questions to decide whether or not this is the right pathway forward for you. On a macro basis, and Kim always does this, I'm going to do it somewhat differently. We're a securities law firm. We represent probably nearly 60 or 70 public companies. We do a lot of alternative finance programs, as I mentioned. The number of IPOs in this country has dropped from 15 years ago from 1,000 a year. I don't think we'll do 200 this year, right? Andy, you have a more current figure? But it'll be 150 to 200 because there's been a huge push, as Kim points out, to the private markets to raise money privately and then do sales of those businesses privately and not tap the public markets because of the complexity of the securities laws, the disclosure requirements, the audited numbers, and all the costs and burdens associated with that. So if the public markets are doing, let's call it 250 was in 2015, and those are mature companies, including the unicorns that we all read about, but it's a pyramid of companies, then maybe we do a number proximate to that, slightly larger than that, but in terms of where this market is going to go, there's nothing wrong with niche markets. This was set up to be an alternative program. It's alternative for those, meaning that you can't necessarily get a broker-dealer involved in your deal. However, David Feldman, who will also be here later, I believe. David's coming? I'm not sure. He and I are working on a hybrid offering. Starts off best efforts, the crowd, and then flips, hopefully, into a fully marketed, underwritten deal. Kind of interesting. You have retail confirming the focus group aspect of the deal, and then you flip it into an underwritten deal, and the institutions come in, and then you create a public market opportunity for that company. That company is strong, has a loyal following, has real revenue, and makes real money. Were those questions? Sorry.
Is the first part of that just like a test the waters phase, or is that they're actually committing?
No, they're
funds?
actually committing funds. It's not test the water. Let's talk about test the water for a second, and I hope others here tell me why I'm wrong. I think test the waters is a very interesting feature of Reg A, but I think it's also misunderstood, and I certainly misunderstood it myself as well. Going out to test the waters in order to determine whether or not you're going to proceed and you're going to spend the money on the lawyers and the accountants and the infrastructure of this is a great idea. However, the reality of it has turned out to be that the drop-off between the test the waters interest and the closing 120 days later, it's a tough thing to keep retail investors' interest. So you need to talk to the people who've done those deals to really understand whether or not that makes sense, or you have to really just jump in and spend the money. I can't answer that. There are other people who hopefully will speak to that later on. I can go in, and this is not available for SPACs, blind pool offerings, 40 Act company investment companies, or companies that are currently already reporting. With that, I think I'll conclude and to see if you guys have any questions for me. Okay.
That hybrid offering, can you go into a little more detail about how that's being, the mechanics behind that?
We're working through them. We're actually, I can't because it's not been done before. There are a lot of different subtleties to the questions, which is why you're asking it, and I can't answer it yet because we're exploring it as we're going through it.
So I can weigh in on that.
But look, before you do that, because I would like you to, Scott, is the utility of that is so important potentially for this industry, and the initial conversations to the staff were very right-minded in understanding we're breaking new ground. We are trying to do something with this form that you wouldn't see in a traditional IPO, i.e. enlist the passion of the crowd, whether or not you get them to commit up front or not to be discussed, and then you flip it into the institutional. But okay.
One of our customers, broker-dealer, is about to take out a $30 million Reg A, and $20 million is going to be sold institutionally and $10 million through the crowd.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously.
So not in
But they're on a roadshow right now, which is their testing the waters phase, to the institutional buyers to get them lined up and teed up for this deal, so that when they go live, which we're thinking is next week, they're going to have, an invest now button on the broker-dealer website for the retail crowd, and the institutional crowd is going to settle up through RBC and a single DTC-like settlement of $20 million. So I think that's probably going to be the first hybrid, fingers crossed, will be successful.
which is really clever, and how different firms approach the conversation and how you marry the crowd to the institutions is going to vary. There's not a right answer currently. I think that's clever. It's one separate.
Be approved by the same regulatory.
This one Reg A offering is $30 million.
So it's $130 million, and they're marketing it as two separate internally, effectively. But you have to get your FINRA comp pre-approved in that regard. In ours, we were going to pre-approve the design of it all up front with an automatic flip with a supplement during the process. Okay, I'll do questions. Remind me to come back to FIG if I may.
Is the flip, I realize you can't go into details, but is the flip premised on a condition like?
No, just whenever the crowd's exhausted, for lack of a better term.
So it's not like having to attain X.
No, because the institutions in this case don't care if the crowd comes in. The company does. And part of the argument is you want the company to raise as much money and pay as little fees on that money as they can, and then the institution, you have the flip.
What about investors that want to jump the gun a little bit, do a private placement before Reg A comes in?
Yeah.
Does that cause any wrinkles in the fabric later on or anything?
You have to be careful. There are rules on integration. Integration meaning that the SEC doesn't, if you don't do it in a particular way, they're going to integrate that private placement with the public offering, and that'll invalidate the private placement, and you may have to offer rescission or delay your offering. So work with your securities lawyers to be careful. If you close the private placement before you go live on the Reg A, I think you'd be okay, but there are a lot of details that need to be ironed out. Mark?
Yeah,
Oh, come on, you don't get to ask me a question. I'm just going to ask you to answer it.
And I hope you can't answer it. No, you don't need to answer it.
George can answer it for you.
On your two-step deal, do the institutional investors get the same deal?
Exactly. I don't think there is a way to do it. I wouldn't even want to, I would dissuade a client from even engaging in that conversation, just the way I don't like that question. But yes, yes, the crowd has to be treated respectfully and equally in that deal, even whether or not we close the money at exactly the same time, which I think we're going to, or you close the crowd first. FIG. FIG you also ought to look at. It's a very interesting platform. We spent months with the SEC getting it through. And this is to show you that one size doesn't fit all. You guys may have a different approach and work with your securities lawyers to see if it's a possibility. FIG is a platform where they raise money for kids' gaming development. And each developer has a new game. And we all know from Kickstarter and Indiegogo, those deals have gotten a lot of traction. So this platform in San Francisco said, okay, we're going to raise money for these games, whether or not it's $50,000 or $5 million, but the return of the investors is tied solely to the individual game. So you invest in the platform in a Reg A offering, but you have a tracking stock called game shares tied to the specific game of interest to you, and then you get a % of revenue. Very interesting. It's never been done before. It took us months.
Can foreign investor participate in the regulation in course?
Can a foreign
investor, I mean, if you can market it overseas, the foreign investor can purchase the stocks.
So Mark and I had a discussion about this in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and let's see if we can come together on this one this time. From a U.S. perspective, if you're not violating any rules. It's a registered, it's an exempt offering here, but you've gone through the SEC process. The SEC doesn't have a jurisdiction per se on whether or not you violated the rules of that foreign country. Our view is be very careful. It doesn't hurt the US portion of the deal, but if in fact you've marketed into a country where you've marketed and you may have violated the local rules of that jurisdiction, because that may be a public offering into that country, and that's where it becomes very problematic. Different countries have different approaches to general solicitation. We as a country are very sensitive to if you make a public announcement about an offering. In other countries, and I won't name which countries because there's subtleties to this, just posting it online is not marketing into that country from their point of view. And so it probably would not be a problem. In other countries, so in that same country though, if you're paying people to market in there in any directed way, that probably would violate even their general solicitation rules. Hi Sam, do you want to add to that?
No, I just want to add to the gentleman's question about doing a private placement.
Oh, sure.
Because I think it's an important point in terms of utilizing regulation. I don't want to get too technical. There are all kinds of detailed rules in the regulation about what's called integration, or when the SEC views offerings to be compliant. So in the Reg A plus, that means you have to have a certain amount of time between that and earlier private placement. Without getting into detail,
He's saying it's permissible.
As far as what's relevant to people in this room, it is, will be a common structure. For example, when you're thinking about doing a Reg A Plus offering, they don't have the money for all the expenses, so they want to go out and do a private placement to raise the money. That's very common. And
Exactly.
discounts, your marketing price.
You're doing a bridge to a public offering.
The rules are very generous, so I mean, you really won't have any timing issues. You ordinarily won't. I mean, obviously, you need to talk to your security.
Right, but you can't do a 506B offering while you're live on your Reg A deal.
No, I'm just talking about doing a private placement and then.
Yeah,
and then-
in sequence.
and then rolling it in.
Yeah, so just because I think it,
Flexibility.
okay, so just for, because the resources available to you. So I'm a securities lawyer, Sam is a securities lawyer, Mark is a securities lawyer, George is a securities lawyer. I think Jonathan may or may not be in here. Jonathan, there he is. So there's a lot of folks for you to reach out to. They're all very knowledgeable. They've been part of the industry from the beginning. Ron Miller thinks he's a securities lawyer at Start Engine. No, same thing with Scott. Anyway, these are people who have deep knowledge. By all means, reach out to them. Oh, you don't get to ask a question, Kim. Come on.
This is not a hard question. This is a good, easy question.
Okay.
I just forgot to cover it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the advantage of using regulation crowdfunding to get the digital footprint in place, to then lever that funding, to then do the Reg A Plus, and how they don't breach, and how to do it in a way not to breach the disclosures, et cetera.
Okay, it's a very good point. It's not so much a question as it is a, Doug, you forgot to say this, and I appreciate it. The point is that there are all these new tools that are available under the Jobs Act provisions from 2012. Title II is, Title III, which Kim's speaking about, is regulation crowdfunding, which allows an issuer, both Reg A and regulation crowdfunding are only domestic U.S. companies, although Reg A can also be Canadian. Does Reg CF allow Canadian? I don't think so. It's only domestic. And so you could raise, if you're not sure if you want to go do a Reg A Plus yet, so you're kind of reversing my observation. You might not be ready for Reg A Plus yet, but you may want to do a Reg A Plus offering. But in the meantime, like Sam said, you might want to raise some money, pocket change to get your Reg A Plus deal going, or for other reasons. And so you can do a Title III Reg F campaign through one of the 19 portals that are currently visible that Kim mentioned, that are approved by FINRA, to raise up to the $1 million. And that then takes you into being able to more efficiently go after your Reg A Plus deal. The other thing, so I want to mention some names for you so that you have resources to go look at. Did you? Since I obviously was deficient in my answer, Kim, by all means, add something.
Oh no, so some of the platforms are allowing you to do regulation CF, and then you graduate from the CF to either a Reg A or the 506C. And so I think that there is a really nice progression to find a platform that you could work with to get your social capital and digital footprint very strong on a platform, and lever that relationship to then graduate to the next level, and then over to the OTC when that's possible. So I just think that if we do this methodically, there is a way to learn and not violate the regulations and compliance laws, and also build strong following over the course of raising capital in long term.
So an example of that, Kim, is Start Engine is here, and Start Engine is a approved FINRA Title III platform that also does Reg A deals. Have you currently undertaken doing a Title III into a Reg A Plus, Ron? It's something we can obviously do. It makes a lot of sense. All right, have you done any?
There's several in process. And
okay.
We are strongly encouraging that mode unless there's exception. And there are exceptions. I would say UEO is one. But for the most part, finding out that you in fact do have traction with your investor base is really important. So what we've done, we've actually, to encourage it, we actually will rebate the Reg CF fees back to a Reg A Plus, so that you raise a Reg CF, because we don't want people to have to pay us twice, right? So if you raise that first million, there's fees against it, it's about 5%, so you got a $50,000 fee, we credit that towards the Reg A plus fees.
Did you leave anything out of your marketing pitch on that?
It's all right. If that's a good, I'm up next.
But I think Kim's broader point is different platforms serve different purposes and functionality, and so if you want to do a sequential series of financings, that's an option. There are other platforms that are standalone Reg A plus or just doing Reg CF, and all you care about at the end of the day as an issuer is raising money. So work with the platforms that are most likely to get to the promised land. Kim, wait a second.
Just one more thing.
One question here first.
Just
One little thing.
One little piece is that if you don't want to go to the crowdfunding platform, you should also think about on your own website, again, driving traffic, work with Fund America, because you can click the Buy Now button on your own website. And again, it helps to start driving that traffic and relationship. It's about raising capital formation.
Right. Okay. So, great. Thank you, David.
Can you just take a minute about the cost element of the Tier 2 Reg A offering?
That's a good point.
Other than auditors and finance and obviously legal.
Right. I actually had a note to do that, so thank you. Sticker shock. No. It's a mini IPO, and it's actually, in my mind, quite remarkable how the costs have been driven down. Okay? Down. To traditional securities law analysis, a mini IPO, Reg A plus, I'll be done in 1 second, Sydney.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, great. The work effort is pretty much the same thing if there's a broker dealer involved. It's an underwritten offering, yet the pricing model, because there are more people who've been drawn into this with smaller law firms, credible law firms, quality people, the cost is significantly less. If there's no underwriter, so the range on that conversation, it's still a public offering. People are doing them for $150 with a broker dealer involved where there's underwriter counsel and you need opinions of counsel. So that's different than most of what the industry has done up till now, which is self-directed offerings without an underwriter. There are folks who are doing them for $50. Again, just the legal fees. I'm not talking about the accounting fees because those are audited numbers, which will cost more.
But they don't have to be POCB authorized, right?
They do not need to be, well, for Tier 2, I bet you they do need to be PCAOB. No, they do not. Okay, fine. So not PCAOB. So as low, that's a savings.
If you want to flip into a trading market, probably makes no sense.
Over
to start
time,
that way.
correct. And so I think people do front load the thought process that way. And then without an underwriter, 50 to 100, depending on the maturity of the company, the due diligence involved in the company. I've seen it as high as with the large firms who think that this is a new line of business, 250, 350. But that's probably the numbers. But it's also the time. There's a lot of time involved.
Could you discuss the cost element of that, probably on the market?
So I think I've seen anything from 4 to 8, Ron, percent. If there, I'm talking regulation crowdfunding because the portals can get a brokerage fee. If you're a platform that you're not a broker dealer, you can't be paid transaction-based compensation for helping out on those deals. Broker dealers, I think, are charging 4 to 8%-ish if they're doing any of the above. And sometimes there's warrant coverage in the Reg CF world, which the rules permit.
So a few years before Facebook went public, I fell upon a platform where VCs and angels were reselling.
Yeah, second market or shares post.
Right. Can crowdfunding investors, do they have a platform for that?
So in order to do that, and Blaine's here, he'll probably speak to it later at Folio, you cannot do secondary market transactions on a funding platform. You need to be a registered broker-dealer or an exchange.
But myself.
Oh, but your point was with shares post and second market, they were doing pre-IPO secondary market transactions. I think they were both broker-dealers, Blaine? You don't know?
Both broker-dealers
Both.
with 30 from one.
Okay. So, but a platform is ill-advised to facilitate second market transactions in Title III in particular, if they're not a broker-dealer.
You can do a private deal.
But that's not institutionally, that's a 4(1.5) transaction where it's just a private to a private. It's not a business line, as it were. If I own shares in Reg CF and I find somebody else to buy them, I can transfer the shares.
Can a platform bring people together?
No, that's creating an exchange. I think that's a problem. Thank you.